This case study I'm sharing with you here. This person is perfectly fine with leveraging debt. So they value leverage. They value leverage. They're willing to service debt. Not a problem. Okay? They're willing to service debt. They're willing to leverage to obtain a particular result. So now here are some numbers that I run to help me help this person. As I look at their current debt coverage on the monthly payments that they have. So they are coming out of pocket $109.62, $52.91. We got $1,395, $1,827 and 53 cents. So they believe in using debt. They believe in leveraging debt. They've done it before. They do have a desire to pay off debt, but they're willing to incorporate a strategy that would help them create wealth and pay off debt. And that's when they stumbled across whole life insurance. So now we want to figure out, how can one go about potentially incorporating, say, the infinite banking strategy plus maybe velocity plus cash flow index, combining these things in to figure out how to go about eliminating these debts and still create the wealth that they want. They do have 4 kids, so they're also risk adverse. All right, so that's another thing. They are risk adverse. They're willing to do anything to make the strategy work, but they're not willing to, go to Vegas and gamble a bunch of money. They're not willing to, invest in a brand new business they never heard of, right? Or start or get recruited into an MLM company, right? Put a bunch of money behind that and start selling something, right? So they're not willing to throw their money in the market, but they are willing to do things to improve whatever strategy we do pick. So risk adverse, value leverage, willing to service debt, not a problem. They're not stressed out. When we were talking, they weren't stressed out about this debt, right? They already had a plan in place. So let's look at some other numbers. We know that $1,827.53 is their debt obligation to service these debts. And we have, let me see their age real quick. So we're 36 years old is our age. We do have time on our side. They are in their prime years of producing income. They're not slowing down, they're speeding up. They're in the construction industry, okay? They make pretty good money, not too bad. Let's look at this cash flow left over. $2,735 with 90 cents times 12 in a year. Here's how much cash flow they produce. $32,830. Take their monthly payments, $1,827.53 times 12, $21,930. 36 cents. So they've got what? Almost $22,000 a year that's going towards debt payoff, and they have $32,830.80 of free cash flow. If we were to add those two numbers, $32,830.80 cents, that's $54,761.16. So you can do this for yourself in your own finances. Take your cash flow times 12, take the total amount of payment obligations that you have, times that by 12, add the two, see what your number is. So you got $54,761.16. You were to take that number and then divide it by the amount of debt that you have, $155,521.71 divided by $54,761.16. So it's safe to say that in this case, should take them about, because this is assuming all interest, right? So 2.8 years, but I'm just going to add, like half a year to a year. So very conservative, I can say 3.8 years or less debt-free. That's what? Making extra payment. And the way we went about doing that to get to that 3.8 years could have been snowball, avalanche, cash flow index. They probably all would have produced the same result. But if we would have went the life insurance route, it could potentially take longer to get out of debt, but they would be creating more options and creating more wealth than the person that just pays off debt. So taking a look at the discussion of whole life insurance, right? Because this is what they're looking into incorporating into their finance, even though they're in debt, right? They've got enough cash flow to say, okay, before I send this money in a year directly to the debt, how can I maybe put this into an asset that could grow and then borrow from there and pay off debt? What would that look like? What could that potentially look like? So now what I'm going to share with you are some life insurance designs. All right, I'm going to share with you a life insurance illustration that I'm currently working on with this client. All right, so we got a premium total pay-in of $15,000 a year is our number, with the ability to do more, right? They can pay in the range of a little over $27,000 a year or more. I'll have to confirm on that. This just shows what it would look like if they saved $15,000 a year first into a life insurance policy, and then over time used that asset to then pay off debt at a later point in time. So what's happening is they're using the methodology of saving money, and we can also say investing money, because not 100% of our cash flow is going to go into this policy, but we got a good percentage. And it looks like in the first year, we get a death benefit of $1.5 million. We have a total cash value of roughly $10,900. And that would be the method of just simply saving money first. They would continue to pay their debts, their monthly payments, just the monthly minimums, but they're not accelerating their debt, okay? They're not accelerating their debt. So now let's create some space at the bottom here. So I gave you the numbers that I typically look at to evaluate the timeline if they were to just simply pay off their debt early, so they can see what they're working with. 3.8 years or less is like the range I'm giving, right? Total estimation. Cash flow times 12, payments times 12, add those two. This is how much money they would be sending to debt. So what you're doing is you're taking the dollars that you would say no longer be sending to debt directly and say, okay, what are we going to do with that money to increase the value of it so that 3.8 years from now or less, preferably, that you could have all this debt eliminated, but then still have an entire asset to work with, right? So when coming up with a amount to fund into their life insurance policy, this is like the other math that we're figuring out, because I'm also looking at, again, like they're willing to leverage, but we want to be safe. We don't want to take on too much risk. We don't want to put too much cash flow into one asset. So what I like to do is take the total cash flow in a year, times it by 2/3. That gives me $21,668. So I know very comfortably this person could save $15,000 a year, which is about under 50% of their cash flow. So you got, so I'll do this so that I show it on the board, 21,668, 32 cents. So I showed saving 15K a year in a policy. I also did a design on the person's wife. So this is on husband. Then I also showed a small policy, 5,000 on wife. And what this is solving for is a multitude of things. First of all, we get a death benefit, 1.5 million. They do have 4 kids. Something happens to him on his journey of paying off debt, and he was sending all his cash flow to eliminate the debt, but then passes away. Now the wife is left with all the debt, loss of income, and nothing to replace his income. So there's a risk there that when you're deciding on which debt strategy to go with and your foundation and how you're going to proceed with your finances, something as simple as that could be the different decision factor that you make before pressing forward with eliminating debt. You're like, you know what, let me get some life insurance first, where in the event something happens to me, my family can pay off all the debts and be able to replace my income for a period of time. So give me a second. I'm going to pull up wife's policy that I designed as well. I want to look at what I did there. I'm just going to write the numbers out, make it easy. So it was $5,000 a year. Death benefit on the wife is $500K, okay? He makes more money, so we put more life insurance on him. That's what makes more sense typically when you're doing death benefit planning and such. You look at who is the higher income earner. So here's what's laid out. We got 20K going into life insurance, let's say over the next 3 to 4 years. All right, let's just say over the next 4 years. The difference between $32,830 and 80 cents and 20 grand is what? $12,830.80. What do we do with that money? We could either A, drive those funds into these two policies, or B, this money could be invested. So we could be investing the difference that we're going to be saving, and then what's left over was $12,830.80, and they're going to invest it and hopefully earn a higher rate of return than the average cost of money that they're servicing, preferably is what I would be shooting for, right? So if I'm going to invest this $12,000, I want to be earning at least double what I'm paying in interest over here, so that when that money grows 4 years from now, plus this money over here, I have options as to how I can eliminate the debt. Or option 3 is they take that difference of the $12,830.80, right? $12,830.80 divided by 12. So it's about $1,000 a month, and they could use that $1,000 a month to make extra payments toward their debt. So here's where layering starts to begin. So far, here's what I gave you in terms of how I think when I'm looking at your numbers. I got the 4 major numbers. I'm presenting all the debt payoff strategies that you may be interested in, and we're going to look at it thoroughly. What helps me mark off certain strategies is based off your current beliefs and facts about money and the financial foundation that we want to build or maybe already have built. I know that this person has a financial foundation built. They don't need confidence or momentum to go down their debt freedom path, so I already eliminated that snowball and that avalanche. They were already learning, getting educated, and interested in this conversation about life insurance. And I think they already knew a little bit about cash flow index. So if we were to look at, which debts would I hit first, let's take a look. $5,697.08 divided by 109.62. That's 51.97, and then 1,359.63 divided by 52.91, 25.69. Mortgage, 142.285 divided by 13.95. That got a 101. This is cash flow index, what I'm doing. 6,180 divided by 270.22. So when doing cash flow index, what does cash flow index say? Cash flow index says go after the lowest number first and work your way up. So cash flow index ignores interest cost. That snowball says I need to pay this off first. The 1,359 charged me 6.97%. That avalanche says pay this off. 6.97%. It's the highest interest rate and lowest balance. But cash flow index says from a cash flow perspective, pay this off first, because by the time you pay this off, then you come to the personal loan, get rid of that. Then you go to the second personal loan, get rid of that, and then you finish the mortgage off last. You see what happened there? So 2 different debt elimination strategies are telling me to do different things. They're not, looking at the same numbers that are being presented. So at this point, it becomes either a mathematical solution that we would have to just iron out, well, which one gets me out of debt faster? And there's a high chance that cash flow index does get you out of debt faster. Sometimes it's not always the case, though. From what I've seen, this might be similar to that. But nonetheless, the results won't be too crazy because of his cost of money overall is not crazy, what we're dealing with here, right? So we did cash flow index. We did cash flow times 12. We got our 4 major numbers. We did cash flow times 66% to help us determine how much money we could safely save in a year while still servicing your debts, paying everything on time, and still having a chunk of change left over that still hasn't been purposed yet. So where we're at this point in our journey here on this one case is we have the potential where we're going to lead with our first primary strategy being developing a life insurance contract, a properly structured whole life insurance policy to save money first to protect his family with that death benefit of $1.5 million. In case anything happens to him, his family would be just fine. He also puts life insurance on the spouse in case anything happens to the spouse and he's still working. The wife brings in some money, so her income needs to get replaced in case anything happens to her, and then death benefit gets paid out, right? Because he's going to need a lot of help to take care of 4 kids. He's not going to be able to work the way he could work if wife's no longer there taking care of the kids, right? So we're evaluating those additional factors. Again, these 4 questions to build that base, that foundation. How we're going to proceed before we proceed. Very, very important, right? You see what I'm doing here? So whole life insurance is our main foundational strategy before we pay off debt. We need to get these things set up first. So we're going to allocate $20,000 either all at once or over a period of time. $15K into one policy, $5K into another. Very safe, easy to do, according to his cash flow. $20,000 a year. $32,000 minus the 20, you're left with $12,830.80. We haven't decided yet what we're going to do with that spread, but we have options. And like I said, option 1 was you take that $12,830.80, simply invest it. So you're actually taking it out of your strategy, and that's for the long run. And you might map out a 4-year investing strategy, sending $12,800 a year, which is about $1,000 a month, a little over $1,000 a month, is going into a investment strategy that is somewhat liquid, preferably. We don't want to put it in a qualified retirement account because then we're not going to be able to access it to pay off all these debts, right? Because he still wants to pay off debt, but he wants to do it efficiently. And efficiently doesn't always necessarily mean the fastest. So I can tell you without a doubt, what we're engaging in right now is not the fastest way to get out of debt. But again, debt is not hurting this person. This person doesn't believe that debt puts him in an enslaved position. This person believes in the use of leveraging debt to get to their goals faster. And with proper leverage rules and understanding leverage capacity and understanding good stewardship, puts them in a more advantageous position overall. Do you agree with me or not? Put that in the comments, whether you agree with what I'm saying, if you're on board, or if I'm losing you, okay? And you'll have to, rewind, come back, watch it a few more times to fully get it. But my goal is to speak slowly through these things because I know who I'm talking to, right? I know who's really gonna actually proceed with this kind of a move in their personal finances. We have option 1, 12,000, invest it. Option 2, so that's 1. Option 2, dump into policy. I designed the policies in a way where we can put more money in there than what we're scheduling. So you could do that. Or 3, debt snowball essentially. I'll just say extra payments to debt. And if we incorporate cash flow index to tell us which debt to pay off first, then what's happening is you'd be paying off the medical debt, then jumping to the personal loan, then jumping to the next personal loan, and then finishing off at the mortgage. So now the final piece is the potential of maybe doing this, velocity banking. So velocity banking is the 4th move that would incorporate this, which is maybe on his mortgage, which has plenty of equity. We obtain a HELOC in the 2nd position, getting a 2nd lien home equity line of credit at an interest rate in 2025, preferably below 7.5%. Some kind of an intro rate, no closing costs, preferably. And we could see ourselves maybe using the home equity line of credit to jumpstart these 2 policies, max funding them, okay? Now, in this case, I do believe he already has cash on hand to get the policies fully funded, so he may not even need to do that. But in terms of the difference of the 12, all right, so once I dump 20 into the 2 policies, right, I could just let that money sit in there and it would, for the first 3 to 4 years, it operates as an emergency fund. And then they could use, potentially, it doesn't have to be, this just adds more complexity. They could use a HELOC if the rate is equal to or lower than these, preferably. Use velocity banking on just those 2 debts and then just make extra payments. But I would still get a HELOC just to have it. So you get another layer of capital protection if need be, not required, right? So that would be the only other added on thing here that I see. Maybe I'm missing something, right? But I think the simplest, most efficient thing that they could do is they decide to save a portion of their cash flow each year into these policies. Operate them as emergency funds for the first 3 years. Let them grow. Let the money grow. Take that difference of cash flow, $1,000 a month, and start making extra payments on these debts, right? Paying $1,000 plus $270 a month, this will be done in like 6 months, right? 6 months or less. And now you got $1,000 and $270. And then so 6 months later, you're hitting this, and in 1 month, now that's paid off. So that's 7 months right there. And then you go another 4 months, and now that's paid off. So 7 and 4 is 11. So we could say in 1 year or less, he pays this off, he pays this off, he pays this off. He's just left with the mortgage. He's got 20 grand saved, $2 million of death benefit, and he only used about $1,000 of his cash flow to create 270 a month, 5291, 10962. So created $432.53 of more cash flow, right? I'm gonna delete this part here, and I'm gonna tell you according to the designs I have here by year 4. So by year 4 on wife, if we just put 5K a year, right? Year 4, we got about 18,257, and on husband, year 4, let me look at that real quick. On husband, we got 55,272. In 1 year, he pays off 3 debts, just left with the mortgage. So outside of saving 20 grand a year, we've got 12,830.80 in a year. Divided by 12 is 1,069.23, plus moving forward into this in year 2, we have this total cash flow we're moving with now of 432.53. So we're at 1501.76, and the last remaining debt is the mortgage of 1395. 1501.76 plus 1395. 2,896.76 is going towards debt pay down on his mortgage. Say he's just making extra payments. Let's just say still sending 20K a month into here. 2,896.76, and we're going to times that by 12. That's 34,000 a year, right? Rough estimations. Okay, 1395 times 12 is 1674. Round down. I don't know how much of that is escrow, I forget. Let's say only 900. Say like 800 went to the principal. It's like 9,600. Okay, so 142.35 minus 9 grand. So after a year, let's say the balance on the home is 133K, right? 33,500 divided by 34,761. That's still 3.8 years, right? So then what would happen is we're already 1 year in, so do 1 year per 2, year 2, 1 year, year 3 is 2 years. Say by the 3rd year, they paid 34,761, 16 times 2. Say they paid like 70K toward this, and then do another year, 34,761, 16. So I think that's 4 years total, 104,000. The rest they could have borrowed from the policy, right? Could do something like that. And they left that security blanket throughout paying off debt, because again, they weren't necessarily like going for speed, but they're going for efficiency, safety, building an asset, growing wealth, maybe investing, maybe not. Having that flexibility, not being like tied in, are what helps them build this entire thing out, right? And as I'm sharing this with you, like I still have to go to the client and work this through with them. They're gonna watch this and they're gonna review it and they'll say, you know what, I wanna take that piece, this piece, throw out that last piece, keep this, and we'll map that out. All right, so that's what gets really fun, is they're putting themselves in a position where they're giving themselves a lot of options to work with while maintaining good stewardship, good cash flow, keeping their options open, very, very efficient, not stressed at all on these debts, right? But they still want to get rid of it, and they get to do that by creating wealth. And that's what something like a whole life insurance contract that has liquidity allows them to do. And the money that's growing in this completely tax-free, and I still left them with, 12,000+ a year. Like, let's say they just did snowball for 1 year, extra payments with that first 12. Within 1 year, those 3 things are done. Now I got a $1,500 cash flow. And they might just say, all right, I'm just gonna make an extra payment of $500 toward the mortgage. The other 1,000 I'm gonna invest, and I'm gonna save 20 over here. And then once I get to year 4 or year 3, I'll take a big loan out of the policy and wipe out a majority of the loan balance. And then I might pull from my investment and borrow against that to pay that off, and just redirect the interest, pay myself back over time. Not bad at all. That is a deep masterclass using a case study, using real life numbers to help us figure out what debt payoff strategy we want to go about using. And you want to give yourself that time. Notice how we spent almost 2 hours here. You want to give yourself that time to really go through these videos, decide on potentially bringing in a financial professional, right? If it's me, wonderful. I'd love to be that person. If it's not, let's bring in someone that you spend a good amount of time viewing and learning from, maybe attending some free workshops that they have or classes, getting to know them, build that relationship. Then you're like, okay, here's some money to invest. I want to have your time to help me figure this all out, how I want to proceed, okay? So I'm going to scroll up because I'm pretty much done here. I'm going to scroll up. I want to hold myself accountable. There was like 2 questions I saw earlier, and then I'm going to like do my best to skip through what I've already covered in certain questions and see as many questions I can get to before I gotta bounce. I do